Hello and welcome to today's art lesson. This is art lesson 2 of your 5th grade year. We're going to continue our study of Paul Klee today by looking at his biography and trying to find some answers to some questions. And we'll be also looking at some of his artwork and participating in a gallery critique that's going to help us with a gallery critique of our peers' artwork later in the semester. So before we get started with the video, I just want to look at the questions I'm going to have you be listening for. In this video, I'm going to ask you to look for the question, what instrument did Paul Klee play? I'm also going to ask you to look for where was Paul Klee when he discovered his love of color. The next one is what was the name of one of the art schools where Klee taught? And the last question I'm going to have you keeping an ear out for was about how many works of art did Klee create in 1933? Now, Paul Klee's name actually means clay, and you'll hear in this presentation that the speaker tends to refer to him as Paul Klee. Both are correct and okay to say, but we're going to watch this video together, and then we are going to look for the answers for those questions.
Paul Klee was a Swiss-German painter who absolutely amazes me. Klee's parents were both musicians, so creativity certainly ran in the family. Klee took up the violin and was so good by age 11 that he was asked to play with the Bern Music Association. But once Klee reached his teenage years, the typical rebellious side settled in and he moved away from music towards painting. After receiving a fine arts degree in Munich, he got married and had a son. It was also during this time that Klee discovered he had a passion for travel and found himself amazed by ancient Roman art and architecture, as well as Tunisian art. In fact, it was while traveling in Tunisia that Klee was inspired by the amazingly beautiful colors, which led him into experimenting with abstract art. Check out this quote from Klee. "Color has taken possession of me. No longer do I have to chase after it. I know that it has a hold of me forever. Color and I are one. I am a painter." This inspiration seems to have found its way into nearly all of his work, including this piece, Red and White Domes. However, what impresses me the most about Klee is what he accomplished while serving in World War I in 1916. Even though he had to serve in the military, he was still able to continue creating. He actually converted a closet inside a small painting area just outside his barracks. Talk about incredible dedication. This pen and ink piece titled Death for the Idea is incredibly thought-provoking. Do you see the figure inside this picture? Yeah, he is laying down while covered in different types of lines. In the background, you see how these lines slowly progress from abstract shapes, then into what appears to be a city. I think Klee was maybe asking what the real cost of war was and what he thought countries were actually gaining from it. Klee continued to pursue a career in art after the war, and even held several teaching positions, including at the Bauhaus, which had to be an awesome experience. Just to let you know, the Bauhaus was an art school in Germany that was focused on design. In fact, the word Bauhaus actually means construction house. This school is often referenced as having the most influence within the design world ever. Just check out this famous chair called the Wassily chair. I bet you've seen this timeless design before. It seems to be around the 1930s that Klee hits his creative stride. You definitely see this growth when looking at his piece entitled Ad Parnasum, which has a very pointillistic quality to it. Look closely and you can see all the details he added. During the year 1933, Klee created nearly 500 pieces of artwork. This passion to create reminds me of Van Gogh's intensity. It's a great reminder that an artist often has to create hundreds of paintings to find the few that remain timeless. As I often say, we only see about 10% of the work an artist creates, but it took the other 90% to get there. Unfortunately, in 1933, Klee started feeling symptoms of a terrible disease called scleroderma, which slowly hardens the skin. And for Klee, it made it very difficult to swallow. Despite feeling terrible, he continues to create. His condition continued to get worse until his death in 1940 at the young age of 60. Amazingly, Klee was able to produce some 10,000 artworks, consisting of paintings, etchings, and sketches primarily. He stands as one incredible example of pushing the limits, working hard, and never quit creating. I want to leave you with my favorite Klee quote: "A line is a dot that went for a walk." Until next time, be outrageous.
All right. Did you catch those answers to those questions we were looking for? What instrument did Paul Klee play? Where was Paul Klee when he discovered his love of color? What name was the name of one of the art schools where Klee taught? And about how many works of art did Klee create in 1933? Did you catch them? Well, let's see. For the answer to what instrument did Paul Klee play, did you get violin? If you did, that's correct. For the answer to where was Paul Klee when he discovered his love of color, did you get Tanzania? That's in Africa. For your answer to what was the name of one of the art schools where Paul Klee taught, did you get the Bauhaus? If you did, good job. For the last question about how many works of art did Paul Klee create in 1933, the answer that you should have gotten was almost 500. That's almost 500 of his 10,000 pieces that he created. Isn't that amazing? Well, keep an eye on those questions and those answers because they're going to help you out later in your quiz. So now we're going to start our art gallery critique. In order to do that, we need to look at some questions that you're going to need to be looking at and thinking about as you look at each piece of art. These are the same questions you're going to be asking yourself as we do a gallery look through of our peers' work later in the quarter. So the first question that I'd like you to consider is, what is the work of art that you had the most questions about? And then regarding that piece of art, the one you had questions about, what were two things that you wonder about this art piece? Then, out of all the art pieces, which one did you like best? And out of the one that you liked best, how did that artwork make you feel? And what exactly did the artist do to make you feel this emotion? You should be evaluating color and line and texture to see how this piece made you feel. These are the elements that artists use to communicate things. So we're going to start looking at some of these art pieces from Paul Klee. The first one is the Hilterfingen. He created it in July 19th of 1895. Now this is one of his earlier pieces, and we can see that he has not made that transition to abstract art yet. This is an ink on paper, and it's very realistic. You can see a church in the background, and trees, and a road, and even probably the Swiss Alps, if I had to bet, if in the background. The next piece of art that you're going to look at is the Comedian. This was done in March of 1904. It starts to get more of that abstract feeling. We definitely see some human figures in there, but it kind of has a creepy, odd look to it. It's an etching. And how does this one make you feel? What do you think you see in this one? Another of his works is the flower bed, and we are truly making our descent here into abstract art. This was done by him in 1913, and it is an oil on cardboard. You can definitely see the flowers in the picture and the leaves, but it's definitely not precise or realistic. So, what do you think about this one? What do you think of his use of color here? What do you think of his use of shapes? How does this one make you feel? Another of his works is this a work of art that we pulled our first project from, and it's called Once Emerged from the Gray of Night. This was done in 1918, and it consists of letters and the use of many colors and a very geometric form. The poem that's found in there has been debated on whether it is a psalm from the Bible or whether it is a Chinese proverb, but neither have the same lyrics that you see in this poem. And so the general consensus is that this is likely a poem that he wrote himself. And so, how does this one make you feel? Do you see how it's darker at the top and more in muted tones, and then it descends into richer and more jewel toned, and finally ends in a more pastel color palette? How do you feel about this one? The next is a very dark art piece with a very strong focal point in the center. You could see the red house in the center, and you can see many different houses and some flora there, and some trees and some bushes. But this is called the Night Feast, and this was done in 1921. It's an oil on paper that he mounted on cardboard, then painted again with oil, and then mounted it on a board. So, how does this one make you feel? Does this one have a darker feeling than some of his previous works? How about this one? This is called the Red Balloon, and it was done in 1922. It's an oil and possibly an oil transfer drawing on a chalk primed gauze and mounted on a board. That's what gives it that neat texture that you see there. This one's incredibly geometric and has a lot of use of some very bright colors. How does this one make you feel? What do you think about this one? Does it give you any questions? And for our last piece, we have the Peach Harvest, done in 1937. This is a watercolor and charcoal on chalk and glue primed paper, mounted with linen strips again on the paper. What about this one? What do you think about the color palette of this one? Do you see the trees in this picture? What about the human figures? Can you make them out? What do you feel about this picture? Does it tell you about a peach harvest? I can see it. Can you? So again, you're going to complete a gallery response art critique, and you may need to go back and look through some of those paintings that you saw there, and you need to answer these questions about Paul Klee's work. Which one of those works of art did you have the most questions about? And about that piece, what were two things you were wondering? Which of those artworks did you like the best? And how did it make you feel? What did Paul Klee do to make you feel that? Did he use dark colors? Did he use bright colors? Did he use hard lines or soft lines? What are some of the things that you can say there? You need to have that well completed, because in your quiz, you're going to be asked those same questions and expected to answer those in complete sentences. That means you're going to have to capitalize the first letter of your sentence and punctuate your sentence. That also means your sentence must have a subject. What's the sentence about? And a predicate. What did that subject do? So make sure you have all of those things in your critique as you fill it out on Teams this week. So this week's assignments is you needed to watch the Paul Klee video that we just looked at. I'm going to put the link again in Teams on our comment board. And then you also need to look again at the video there and make sure that you have a good understanding of those pictures that we looked at. Maybe write down the title of the one that really speaks to you, or the two that really speak to you, and Google them and maybe look at them in greater detail. Then you'll need to complete the Paul Klee quiz on Teams. This quiz is going to cover the questions that we discussed from the gallery response art critique, as well as the questions from the Paul Klee video. If you have those answers, you'll do very well on this quiz, and if you do your best, that's all I can ask for. Now, I noticed that a fair amount of you did not finish last week's work, So I'm just going to review what was due last week. You needed to complete the artist portfolio assignment on Teams. That was due last Thursday. And that piece of art that I assigned from last week is not due till this Thursday, but you'll need to make sure to turn those in. A fair amount of people have some grades that they probably do not like up on Skyward right now, but just fill in those works and it should correct itself in the next couple days or so after you finish it. I just ask if you turn in late work, you give me an extra amount of grace because I budgeted time to grade the works when they were on time, and when they're late, I have to work them into my schedule. So just be a little bit more patient with me when you turn in work late so I can get that in. I hope you have a great week and have a good time kind of thinking through Paul Klee's work. Have a great day. Bye.